সিম্পটোম্যাটিক হয়ে গেল, হয়ে সুস্থ হয়ে গেছি, বুঝতেও পারছি না, এর চেয়ে ভালো তো আর কিছু হতে পারে না। সেটাই। সেটা কি আমারও সবসময় একই প্রাপ্ত।
Experienced chartered accountants, and there are many young chartered accountants also who are coming in. So if there be a combination of experience and youth in your firm, that will be very helpful for the firm, because you will be having the specialization, and the younger member would have the adaptability. They can adapt to the technology very fast, and you all know technology is changing very fast. The business houses are changing. In the long run, the way technology is changing, you will find that a few business will go away. The bigger businesses will become much bigger, and the smaller ones will get smaller. So the small clients that we have today will not be able to, that will not be enough for us in the future. So we have to develop ourselves accordingly. Lastly, since this is a program on code of ethics, which is very important now, since from 1st July 2020, the new code of ethics have come. Ranjit ji is here, who has done a lot. He was the chairman of the Ethical Standards Board last year when this code of ethics was changed after a gap of 10 years. So he is with us to speak on the topic. So we are really lucky to have him here. So commitment to this code of ethics would be another point.
Today
just Sumanda, just a minute. So I think we can go ahead. I just had one more thing to share. In the chat box, I am sharing 3 links for you. So one is for the ICAI Central Delivery System. Nowadays, you are not buying the publications from the institute here because the sales counter has been closed. It's almost 2 to 3 years now. If you have to purchase a book from ICAI, then you have to go to the ICAI Central Delivery System. It works like Amazon. Secondly, ICAI Digital Learning Hub. ICAI has brought this digital learning hub, which is integrated with the self-service portal. Here you can get many videos and on various topics from the best of the person, best of the speakers from India. So you can use that tool to upgrade yourself too. And thirdly, in Udin, now you can generate 300 Udins at a time. I think there is a misconception. Many people are thinking that for 300 assignments, I can generate 1 Udin. So that is not the case. Only this will help you to generate 300 Udins easily at one go. That is the idea. And Ranjit ji, he is here. He has conceptualized Udin, and after that, Udin was implemented. So if he wants, he can also speak on this. So with this, I wish you all best of luck, and I wish this program is a grand success. Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot. Sumanda, over to you.
Thank you, Devan. Today our speaker is Ranjit Kumar Agarwal, who required no introduction, but as a customary, I'll just read off his biodata. He is a practicing chartered accountant since last 20 years. He is also a company secretary and a DISA from ICAI. He is a partner in NRSM and associate since last 20 years. EIC got regional award under his chairmanship in the year 13-14. He has been elected 23rd Central Council of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India for the term 16 to 19 and re-elected for the term 19-2021. Last year, being the chairman of the Professional Development Committee of ICAI, implemented bank branch audit software. Conceptualized the implementation Udin as the chairman of the PDC committee, a landmark reforms of the ICAI, and now this Udin has been generally followed by all other professionals. Presently, he is the convener of the group constituted in implementing Udin concept in all over SAARC countries. As a chairman of the Ethical Standard Board of ICAI in 2019, received the Code of Ethics under a gap of 10 years. Currently, he is the convener of Udin Directorate. He is the chairman of the Capital Market and Investor Protection Committee. He is the chairman of the Tax Audit Quality Review Board. and he is attached with the Lions Club, Barbazar Library, JCI, Calcutta Traffic Police, Friends of Travel Society. And with this and many more, we welcome you, sir, with a round of applause. I'll request everyone to have welcome Mr. Ranjit Kumar Agarwal, and it is all to you, sir.
Thank you, Suman, for the very nice word. Very respected convener of the study circle, Abhijit Datta Sahab, my colleague in the regional council, Devayan Patra, and all the very senior member of this profession. I can see many senior members are there who has come on the online, which they have never thought they have to go and learn the things online. So that is the beauty of our profession. We are very adaptable. Whenever things come, we adapt ourselves. Whether it's a new law is coming or new technology is coming, we very well accept whatever is required to be adapted. So thank you very much, all the senior member, for joining here. Let me share my screen first. Is it coming now, Suman?
It is okay.
Okay. Okay. So, friends, let us discuss the very important topic. What is this code of ethics? Although code of ethics is not a new thing for we professionals, we are following the code of ethics since when the mankind is there, whether it's a Ramayana, Mahabharata, everybody following the code of ethics. But code of ethics cannot be literally codified. Everything, whatever our conduct is there, cannot be written in black and white. But still, the council decided that in the 1963, the code of conduct should be formulated and put in a piece of paper so that the member can practice. As you are aware, our member of the institute has to mandatorily follow all these regulations, CA Act regulation, various standards, guidance note, council guideline, and the most important part is the code of ethics. So when this code of ethics was first introduced in the council in the year 1963-64, that time the president was Mr. R.C. Cooper, and he said while deliberating on this code of conduct that in the larger interest of the institute, the council exhorts all members to search their hearts and conscience whenever in doubt, and thereby assist towards the maintenance of high principle of professional conduct established by the council. These were his opening remark while establishing the code of conduct in 1963. There is a history behind this code of conduct. The code of ethics says it's a state of the mind. Our code of ethics says whenever you are confronted with the two situations, something is legal but not ethical. So our code of ethics says even if something is legal but if not ethical, then we should not resort to practice those things. Of course, ethics is a lawful, but at the same time lawful. And what distinguishes us from the rest of the people, why we are called professionals, there are two fundamental things which distinguish a person from the professional. That is one, code of ethics, and number two, professional does not always work for the personal gain. We have a larger responsibility, and we are always looking for the interest of the society, stakeholder, government, and our personal interest comes secondary and the country interest comes primary, and that is why we are called professional. We are not called businessmen or other, because we have the larger responsibility on our soldier. And that's why, because once you sign anything, that piece of paper becomes a authentic paper for rest of the world. So that's the larger responsibility on the soldier of the professional, and that's why they are called professional. If you see the history of this code of ethics, 1963 code of conduct was first time introduced. Then 2001 it was renamed as a code of ethics, and it was revised also. 2009 this first time we have aligned our code of ethics with the international code of ethics. There is a IFAC, International Federation of Accountant, in wherein 130 countries are the member. India is also one of the member of that IFAC, and they have a committee called International Ethical Standard Board, ISBA. On the same line, our have Ethical Standard Board in ICI. So their code of ethics we have aligned in 2009, and after a gap of almost 13 years, their 2018 code we have now aligned in 2019. So literally 2005 last international code was aligned with Indian code of ethics, and after 2005, after a gap of 13 years, we have aligned their code with our code, and we have also revised our code of ethics. So literally it's a long pending revision, and which we have able to do last year. But in many areas, our code of ethics are more stringent than international code of ethics. Like in India, statutory auditor cannot become internal auditor for the same year. Contingent fees are not allowed in India. We cannot charge fees on percentage of basis except some exceptions. We have our management consultancy service. We have advertisement guideline, website guideline, logo guideline, directory guideline. We have tender guideline. All these types of guideline and these provisions are not prevalent in the rest of the world. And that's why our code of ethics are more stringent than the rest of the world. And what are the repercussions if you don't follow the code of ethics? We have Schedule 2, Part 2, Clause 1, which says that non-adherence to the council guideline is a professional misconduct. So if this code of ethics, which is a council guideline, does not followed by our V member, then it is a professional misconduct. Globally, if you see our code of ethics or other country code of ethics are based on 5 fundamental principles. These are the pillars of these 5 principles on which entire code of ethics are based: integrity, objectivity, professional competence and due care, confidentiality, and professional behavior. These are the 5 principles on which entire our code of ethics has been formulated. As you are aware, we have Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. Our CA Act is said, Schedule 1 talks about those misconduct which are confined within the fraternity. Like you have not communicated with the previous auditor, you are doing solicitation work, you are doing advertisement work, you are taking non-member as a member, or you are charging fees on the percentage basis. All these are conduct which are affecting the fraternity within the fraternity has been bucketed in Schedule 1. And the Schedule 1 has 19 clauses, and this there is a section called 21A which talks about board of discipline. It's a 3-member bench, 2 council member, 1 government nominee. These 3-member bench decide the misconduct as per clause 19. 19 clauses misconduct are decided by this board of discipline, and based on their wisdom, they have 3 recourse. Either they can reprimand you, or they can remove your name from the register for maximum 3 months, or 1 lakh rupees penal provision. Either one or cumulative of 3, depending on the wisdom of this board of discipline. So Schedule 1 talks about the misconduct which are affecting within the fraternity. But now Schedule 2 has 15 clauses. These misconduct talks about the conduct which are affecting outside the fraternity, like stakeholder, government, various regulators, which they are affecting by our conduct has been confined in Schedule 2. Like you are grossly negligent while discharging your duty. You have material departure from the facts and figure you are supposed to mention. You have provided false information in your audit report. All these conduct has been bucketed in Schedule 2, and these are covering affecting the outside the fraternity, and that's why they are in schedule 2. And there is a disciplinary committee as per section 21b. It's a 5-member bench, which is a larger bench than board of discipline. And this 5-member bench comprises of 3 council member, 2 government nominee. They decide based on their wisdom. They decide either they can reprimand, they can permanently remove the member's name from the register of member. Twice in the past, in the history of ICI, a 2-member name has been removed, being a CA, and 5 lakh rupees penal provision. Either 1 or 2 or a combination of 3, depending on the wisdom of this disciplinary committee bench, 5-member bench. So whatever our schedule 1, schedule 2, 34 clauses are there. Code of ethics is a commentary of these 34 clauses. They talks about what you can do and what you cannot do, whether it is permitted by the act or not, what are the various guidelines formed by the council. All these are the part and parcel of our code of ethics. So code of ethics is nothing but a commentary on our various act and various guidelines framed by the council. If you go to this code of ethics, friends, 5 kinds of threats has been mentioned in our code of ethics. These are self-interest threat, self-review threat, advocacy threat, familiarity threat, and intimidation threat. Now we will discuss one by one these 5 kinds of threat. As far as self-interest threat is concerned, suppose in a tender document, you have quoted a low fees, in which low fees you are aware that you are not able to justify the compliance of the various accounting and auditing standards which is expected in that tender document. You have a very close relationship with your client, 20-30 years, and your family, your client family are going together on the holiday. That kind of relationship is there. This is also an example of self-interest threat. You have purchased one joint property with the client, is also an example of self-interest threat. You have taken loan or given loan to the client, is also an example of self-interest threat. So these are some of the examples which has been mentioned in our self-interest threat. How to mitigate, we will discuss one by one, but let us understand these 5 kind of threats. Then there is a self-review threat. Suppose you have developed some system or software for a client, and now the reports generated by this system and software, you yourself are doing the audit. Then this is the example of a self-review threat. Then it's an example of advocacy. Suppose one of the provision of the act, provision or section or a para are affecting your client, and now you are advocating to the government or the legislator that please remove that provision, particular provision or section. Then this is the example of advocacy threat, because you are in a position to influence the legislature for the benefit of your client, is an example of advocacy threat. If the association or an institute or a society, other organization represent to the government for removal of some section provision, that is a different issue. But if you personally want to remove one particular section because your clients are affected by that section, then this is a case of advocacy threat. Then it's a familiarity threat, which talks about suppose you are auditor of a company in which your spouse is a CEO, or your spouse is in a senior position. Your one of the partner has resigned from your firm and he has joined a company in a senior position, and now you want to do the audit of that company, is also example of familiarity threat. You are accepting some gifts from your client on the Holi, Deepavali, birthday, anniversary, and the amount is very substantial. Then these are the examples of the familiarity threat. Long association is also an example of the familiarity, because in this kind of situation, the code of ethics says you are not be independent, because in these situations you are not in a position to make an adverse comment in the behalf of the client. In your audit report, you are not in a position to make any adverse remark or comment, because these kind of relationship exist, and that's why you are not independent. These are the examples has been mentioned in our code of ethics. Then the intimidation. Intimidation threat talks about, suppose you have accepted a substantial amount of gift from your client on the occasion of Deepavali or an anniversary. And now the client is threatening you, if you qualify my report, then I will make public that you have accepted some gift from me. You are going for a bank audit and the manager insists that if you make this account NPA, then you will not get the bank audit next year. Whether he has the power to appoint you next year, but he is threatening you. There are many clients who say, if you qualify my report, I will not give you other non-audit function which are permitted in the act. There are so many examples in this intimidation threat. Suppose you are that gift you have accepted on the various occasion, and now client insists, don't qualify my report, otherwise I will make this public. So these are the examples of the intimidation threat, and so many other examples are there where pressure tactics are there. The clients threatening you for a disagreement for a professional matter or undue advantage they want to take. So these are the 5 kinds of threat which has been mentioned in our code of ethics, and they say how to mitigate these threats. Our code of ethics says either you try to eliminate these threats or reduce these threats to the acceptable level, or you can consult your professional body like ICAI in this regard. If you fail to do all these things, then you have to withdraw from the assignment. You cannot do the audit of that assignment. So how to mitigate these threats, this call we have to take. So this is the best part of our code of ethics. They say ki first you identify the threat and try to remove those threats. If you are not able to remove those threats, then you have to withdraw from the assignments. So like you have quoted low fees. So you cannot quote the low fees. The fees has to be justified, and the institute has the mechanism where they can also ask you the cost sheets when they are got some complaint that you have quoted very low fees. They have the right to ask you on the basis of which you have quoted this low fees. You should avoid by accepting these expensive gifts from the client. So these are the safeguards has been mentioned. If you try to reduce these threats to the level, that is fine. Otherwise, you have to withdraw from these assignments. Then we will discuss some of the rotation, like rotation of auditor. As you are aware, in our Companies Act, 139(2) talks about 5-year rotation for partner and 10-year for firm. We have RBI guideline which talks about cooling of period for central or statutory auditor or branch auditor. We have Housing Finance Board which talks about rotation of auditor in housing finance company. We have SEBI guideline which talks about rotation of auditor for audit of stockbroker and mutual funds. We have Employees Provident Fund Scheme guideline which talks about auditor of these schemes has to be cooling of period after the 2 years or 3 years. Then we have SQC1. SQC1 is the Standard of Quality Control 1. It is already there since 2009. So what is this SQC1? SQC1 talks about if you are auditor of a listed company, then 7 year either cumulatively or consecutively, if you are doing the audit of a listed company, then after 7 year, 2-year cooling is mandatory. You cannot do the audit of a listed company after 7 years for next 2 years. And from 10th year onwards, you can come, but next 2 years you cannot do. So what is the way out? Should you resign? No. Our SQC1 says in those kind of situation where you have audited a listed company, then after 7 years, you cannot be the engagement or audit partner. Your other partner of the firm can be an audit partner, but you yourself cannot be the audit partner for next 2 years. So when this next 2 years, your another partner of the same firm can be the signing partner or audit partner, and after 10th year, you can again come back and audit that company. So these are the safeguard has been mentioned in our SQC1. As far as proprietorship is concerned, is there, these SQC is not applicable, but if you as a proprietor, you want to do the audit of a listed company, then the SEBI guideline says your firm has to get your firm peer reviewed from the ICI. So without getting your firm peer reviewed, you cannot do the audit of a listed company. This is the SEBI guideline. So what does this rotation and all these things SQC1 talks about? All these things talks about the independence. After a certain period of time, you has to be a cooling off period. You cannot do the audit of a company for a long period of time. That is why long association has been a threat in our code of ethics, and that's why this rotation, so many rotation yardsticks has been prescribed by various regulators. This is the only reason of these rotations. Then we have a guidance note on independence of auditor in 2009. Our institute says if you are have been appointed a auditor by the government, like CAG, RBI, or any other government agency, then after demitting the office of that company as a statutory auditor, immediate next year, you cannot do any non-audit function in that company. So 1 year cooling is mandatory in those kind of company where appointment is done by CAG, RBI, or the government regulatory authority. But vice versa is allowed. Suppose you are doing the internal audit of a company. So the next year, you can be the central statutory auditor. But vice versa, in the government company, next year, internal audit is not permissible. These are the guidance note on independence of audit. On the same line, in this new code of ethics, we have also mentioned that if you are an independent director in a company and you have resigned from that company, then next 2 years, you cannot be the auditor of that company. So this is again on the line of the independence of auditor. This provision has also been incorporated. Now we will discuss some of the provision of this new code of ethics. What new has come? As you are aware that till 30th June 2020, our 2009 code of ethics was applicable. In 2009 code of ethics, we had part 1, part A and part B. Part A talks about the code of ethics which are practiced internationally, which has been aligned with our Indian law, which has been covered in part A. Now we have renamed that part A as a volume 1. Part B talks about the domestic provision. What are the various council guideline decision of which are applicable to our Indian scenario has been covered in part B. So we have now renamed this part B as a volume 2. And now this year again we have come out with a new volume 3, which is called case law references. Whatever the disciplinary committee has decided since 1949 to 2019, all the important case law we have compiled in this volume 3 referencer, wherein all the 484 case law we have identified, and we have classified this case law as per the various schedule, various clauses, and various subject heading, like whether these case law related to communication with the previous auditor, or a solicitation, or advertisement, or charging of fees on the percentage basis, or non-payment of stipend to the article. Whatever decision the disciplinary committee has given, we have compiled this case law referencer. So this case law referencer is going to help you whenever you are confronted with a situation, okay, what to do, whether you can do this thing or not. So you can refer this case law. The search option is there. You can write like what is the decision of the disciplinary in the case of non-communication with the previous auditor. So the moment you will search this line, 2030 case law decided by the council will come to your table. So this case law referencer will help you to take your call, decide what you want to do, and what are the opinion of the disciplinary committee in those kind of situations. So this will help you a lot while discharging your duty as a professional chartered accountant. And all these 3 volumes, right now the links are there in the institute website, ethical standard board. It's a free of cost. You can download and keep it. The hard copy, because of the pandemic, we have not been able to print it. Once it will be printed, you can get the hard copy also. But right now, soft copy is available free of cost. Then some of the provisions of this new code of ethics we will discuss. A new concept we have developed in our this code of ethics. This is called administrative service. Now, what is this admin? Suppose you are an auditor of a company, and in that company, if you are assisting the client in helping your client for the routine or mechanical or clerical type of work, like filing of return, the audit has been done and you are compiling the historical data with the consent of the client and filing at the various authority like GST return, ROC return, income tax return, TDS return. So earlier, income tax return, other things you were doing, but nowhere it was expressly written in our code of ethics whether you can do it or not. Now, these type of work, clerical or normal course of operation or this routine work, we have compiled and we have written that these kind of work are allowed to be done by the auditor of the same audit client, and these work will not be considered as a management services as per section 144 of the Companies Act also. So now you can do the same audit client, you can also do the income tax filing, ROC filing, GST filing, TDS filing, or any sort of filing, whatever filing is there, that you can very well do of the same audit client. This provision is going to be benefited to the maximum professionals we have. Like in our institute, there are 90,000 firms. 90,000 firms comprise of 72% proprietorship firm, and 27% firms are less than 10 partners. So literally 99% of the firm in India are less than 10 partners. So this provision of administrative service is going to benefit all these 99% firm, which were not earlier people were doing, but they were not nowhere mentioned in our code of ethics. Now we have expressly written. So now you can very well do all these things. So this is the important change in this new code of ethics. As far as taxation service are concerned, you are allowed to do the taxation service to the same audit client. But a new provision says if you are auditor of a listed company, public interest entity, then you cannot do the valuation work of that entity. Or if you are representing your client in the matter where the disputed amount of tax is very substantial, then you cannot represent your client before courts, or they have defined the meaning of court, that is ITAT after NCLT. So till NCLT you can do. Otherwise also you are not allowed to represent your client in NCLT or court, but they have expressly said you cannot represent. But for the time being, because of the pandemic, these changes in taxation service has been deferred. So there is no impact of any new provision in taxation service for the time being. A very debatable issue has come in our new code of ethics, which says if your single client, the fees from your single client exceeds 15% of your total fees of the firm for the last 2 consecutive years, then this fact you have to disclose to the management or those charged with the government. The meaning thereby, right now we had the self-regulatory measure till June 30th June 2020, which says if your single client fees exceeds more than 40% of the total receipt of the firm, then you cannot do the audit of that client. With some exceptions are there. 2 lakh rupees is no, this provision not applicable. 2 lakh rupees or audit of the government company, NBFC, all these things, exemptions were there. That provision has been repealed. Now instead of that, this 15% provision says if the single client fees exceed 15%, you can do the audit, but this fact you have to disclose to the management. With some exceptions, like this provision not applicable to 5 lakhs rupees, audit of the government company, public sector bank, all these things are exemptions are there. But because of this pandemic situation and other debatable issue, this provision has been deferred, because we are in the process to make this provision applicable only for public interest entity, listed company, and we are also in the process to make a ad hoc exemptions, like 5 lakhs right now is there, so we can make it a 5 lakh rupees per client, like this. So for the time being, this provision has been exempted, so that our SMP clients are not been affected. Then a new provision is also come, like NOCLAR. Now, what is this NOCLAR? We already have Asset 250, Standards of Auditing 250, which talks about laws and regulation in audit of the financial statement, where the financial laws are not complied, then you have to report in your audit that these financial laws are not complied while doing the audit. Now, NOCLAR says that any law in course of audit, if you come across any non-compliance of any provision of the law, whether they are part of your scope of work or not, you have to mandatorily report these facts to the management. These are the non-compliance while doing the audit of your company. So what are those? Like environmental laws, bribery laws, money laundering, insider trading, say terrorist financing, all these things which you are aware while discharging your duty, we come across, then these facts also, in addition to financial law, there are other non-financial laws are there. Also, you have to bring these facts to the management. Like suppose your client has constructed a building which was not permitted by the municipal authority. 1 floor extra he has constructed, and which you have come across. So these are the violation of the law, but you have come across. So now this NOCLAR said in those kind of situation also, you have to report these facts to the management. And most important part of this NOCLAR, this provision is equally applicable to the chartered accountant industry, those who are in employment. So this is going to hugely impact the audit profession, in the sense that if in the company, the chartered accountant working as a CFO or a finance director senior position, and he or she is aware of the non-compliance in his company, and he or she is not bringing these facts to the knowledge of the management or the auditor or the various regulator, then that CA in industry is also guilty of professional misconduct. So this NOCLAR is a huge change as far as profession is concerned, and you practicing or non-practicing, both are covered in this NOCLAR provision. But again, this because of the pandemic, this provision has been deferred for the time being, but it may come back after the situations improve. And starting with this provision will be applicable to the listed company only, starting with. So this is a huge change as far as a profession is concerned, because when now you will go to the audit, you will go for audit to a company, and in that company, the CA is not bringing the facts of that company to you, then that CA is equally responsible as long as you, while not reporting the facts in your audit report. So it's both the CA, industry and practice, are covered in this NOCLAR provision. Then a very important subject has come in our new code of ethics, is called documentation. We have already January 17 council decision which talks about KYC, know your client. So now January 17 provision says that while doing the audit of a company, your working paper file must have a first piece of paper which is called KYC, the description about the client, the various particulars of the client, how you have contacted, how do you have know him, all the facts has to be recorded and put in the working paper file in the while doing the audit of that company. Because today you are the auditor, 10 years down the line, you may not be the auditor. And after 10 years, somebody has done some fraud. Then you will be asked to explain how you have known that person, how you are. So if you have KYC in your file, you will be able to explain on these facts and figure, when I was the auditor, these are the information. This is the one part. Now, in new code of ethics, at the end of each chapter, if you find a very separate paragraph has been mentioned, and that is called documentation. So now this new code of ethics says, while doing the audit of any entity, the audit working paper file must have these facts. What are the facts? The brief description about the client. What are the accounting auditing standards applicable to those clients? What are the communication you have made with the client while doing the audit of that company? How your query has been addressed by the client, the discussion and the communication of those clients, and how you have tried to resolve the various issues of that client while doing the audit of that client. All these facts are mandatorily required to be mentioned while doing the audit of a company. These are not there in previous code of ethics. They have come separately in our new code of ethics. So now your audit working paper file must have all these facts while doing the audit of any client. It may be proprietor, it may be company or a firm, anybody. These facts are mandatory to be kept. And that's why this documentation has become a significant, playing a significant part, in the sense that in the large firm or a big firm, they are used to keep all the documentation ready. But in our SMP, small and medium practitioner firm, we don't do that kind of documentation. So that's why this provision is going to help our SMP client to make their documentation proper and to discharge their function in a more organized way, which we are not right now. Then a new provision has come in our new code of ethics, which talks about resignation of auditors. Now, clause 8, part 1, schedule 1 talks about communication with the previous auditor, NOC. A new para has been added in that provision, which says, suppose you have resigned from a company and the new auditor has come to that company and he has written to you, please tell me what are the non-compliance in that company which you are aware. And if you are aware, being a outgoing auditor, some of the non-compliance in that company, then it is now your duty to provide these information to the incoming auditor. All these information you have to provide diligently if the incoming auditor writes you in this regard. So in addition to the NOC, the incoming auditor may also ask you, please let me know the other non-compliance which you are aware. And if you are aware, then it is now your duty to provide these information to the incoming auditor diligently. So what will happen after this provision, every incoming auditor will start writing you to let me know what are the things you are aware about this company from where you have resigned. And now you have to provide the incoming auditor all these information if you are aware. You cannot say now because of preoccupation I have resigned. That's why SEBI has also come, if you have signed 3-quarter audit report, then the 4th quarter you cannot resign. So all the checks and balances has been put just to not you say I have resigned because I am not interested or some other. If some issues are there, some non-compliance are there in that company, and if you are aware, you have to provide these information to the incoming auditor. So this is a very landmark para in our resignation of auditor, which will also affect our profession, the resignation of the various auditor in the days to come. One more communication with the previous auditor, we have added one more option, that right now you are allowed to communicate with the previous auditor for NOC through registered AD or personal delivery of letter. Now we have also added the email ID, the registered email ID or official email ID. If the incoming auditor communicate with the previous auditor and the previous auditor respond to that mail, then the valid communication has been done as per this new provision. So no more further letter and anything. This is in addition. This is the another option which you can also exercise while communicating with the previous auditors. We have also taken a mandate from the council whether we can communicate with the previous auditor through UDIN portal. Although the guideline in this regard in the process, so we will come later on how you are able to communicate the previous auditor through UDIN portal, which will come later on when the guidelines will be framed. Right now, it is not applicable, but email communication has been added to the various mode of communication with the previous auditor. One more important change we have also done in our advertisement guideline. Till 30th June 2020, we had 2009 Code of Ethics, where 2008 advertisement guidelines were prescribed. When these 2008 guidelines were framed, when that point of time this social media was not so active. Now we have changed this entire advertisement guideline and make it more liberal as far as the profession is concerned. Like all the social media has also been included in our advertisement guideline. While making a presentation to a seminar or in a TV debate or Facebook chat, you were not permitted to mention your firm name till date. Now from 1st July, we have also allowed, in addition to your personal name, your firm name can also be mentioned. There is no bar now. You can also have your YouTube channel while discharging your information to the members at large or disseminating of the knowledge. But this YouTube channel has to be in your individual name, not in your firm name. And the link of this channel, you cannot put the link in the various social media to invite the people to come and visit my channel. That is prohibited. But if somebody wants to come and visit, that's fine. But we have push marketing and pull marketing. Push marketing is not allowed. Pull marketing is allowed. Push marketing means you cannot advertise, please come and visit my channel. But if somebody wants to come and visit, that is fine. So YouTube channel has been permitted to the individual member, not to the firm. On the same line, if you want to do the seminar conferences, that has been permitted to a CA firm for their article, their employee and their clients, or the article of the other firm also. But you cannot do the seminar conferences by your firm for general public at large. For your client, article, employee, that's fine. So all these things we have made these changes in this our advertisement guideline. Visiting cards, you are permitted to mention your visiting card, the diploma which you have got from institute like DISA or diploma in international taxation. But the certificate course you are doing from the institute are not permitted to be mentioned in your visiting card. That's why this visiting card must mention your name, firm name, diploma course, but not the certificate course done from the ICAI. In addition to that, if you are an insolvency professional and registered valuer, then also you can mention in your visiting card, which has been permitted now, which was not permitted earlier. So being a practicing CA, if you are an insolvency professional also, that aspect you can also mention in your visiting card. If you want to sponsor any CSR event also, then your individual name without the CA logo can be mentioned, but your firm name or CA logo cannot be mentioned. Your name, individual name with the CA are permitted. Firm name or CA logo is not permitted. So these are the some of the highlights of the advertisement guideline we have changed. There is another myth about the advertisement of the profession amongst the member that we cannot advertise. We can advertise. We have the advertisement guideline which says that we can very well advertise, but there are the particulars in that advertisement we can mention, like your name, firm name, mobile number, partner's name, services you are providing. All these things are permitted, but there are two conditions the font size of that advertisement cannot exceed 14 font size. And when you are advertising, your firm name or membership number of your member has to be mentioned there. So if you follow these guidelines, there is no bar in making your advertisement in the print media, electronic media, social media. All these are permitted. People are saying you cannot advertise. You can advertise, but with these restrictions, these riders, 14 font and your firm registration number, membership number. By putting all these things, you can advertise. Lastly, we will discuss some of the 2-3 important points of this discussion. This is the corporate form of practice. Now, what is this corporate form of practice? You can be a director, simpliciter, or an independent director in a company, but you cannot be a managing director, whole-time director if you are a practicing CA. Now, this corporate form of practice guideline says if you want to be a director, managing director, whole-time director, you can be, provided you follow these guidelines. What are the guidelines? The name approval has to be taken first from the institute of the company you want to form. And the name approval will be given by the ICI in the same fashion, the way they are giving for your firm as per regulation 190. Now, once the name approval is given by the ICI, the object clause of that company must have to deal with the management consultancy service. Now, there are 27 kind of services in the management consultancy service as per section 224 of the CA Act. Like you can do the valuation work, insolvency work, forensic work, in-days implementation, internal audit. So many works are there mentioned. These kind of work can be with the object clause of that company. All the director of that company has to be practicing CA, and the shareholder of that company has to be their director and their relatives. So if you satisfy these 4 conditions, then you can also form a company and practice in that company management consultancy service. Of course, not to the same client, same audit client of which you are the auditor, but those clients of which you are not the auditor, non-audited client, you can provide these services through this corporate form of practice, which are permissible now. Tender guideline, 2016, 7th of April, Institute has come out with the tender guideline which says if those kind of services which are mandatory to be performed by only chartered accountant as per statute, like tax audit, company audit. So those kind of tender, if the minimum fees is not there, you cannot respond to those tenders. But there are many services which in addition to you, others can also do, like internal audit, stock audit, so many other audit, forensic audit, which only CA, not only CA, others can also do. So in those kind of services, minimum fees criteria is not applicable. But now we have received so many of complaints that many times the regulator also are flouting these tender guideline and putting rupees 100, 500 as a minimum fees. So in this new code of ethics, we have changed one line in tender guideline that the minimum fees has to be commensurate with the size, value, volume and manpower requirement of that work. You cannot just say 500 or 5,000 rupees. That work, scope of the work should align with the fees. The minimum fees is mentioned by the tenderee. And once they are putting the minimum fees, only then you can respond to those tenders. To avoid the low fees or other fees some of the members are quoting in various tenders, to avoid those kind of situation, this guideline has been prescribed in 2016. And let me tell you, more than 22 cases are already under disciplinary mechanism because of the complaint filed by other member against the other member for violation of this tender guideline. Networking guideline is in the process. New networking guideline is coming. Multidisciplinary, we chartered accountant can do the partnership with other professional also as per regulation 53 AB of the regulation, like CS, cost accountant, advocate, architect, engineer, all these professionals has been mentioned already in our regulation since 2006, and we have enabling provision, but the multidisciplinary is not happening because other professionals are not amending their guideline, and that's why this notification is not coming and multidisciplinary is not coming into the picture. But we are in the process to coordinate with the other professional body so that they can amend their guideline. But we as a ICI has already amended their guideline in 2006, and multidisciplinary we have enabling provision, but others don't have, and that's why it is not happening. So these are the some of the important highlights of our code of ethics. You can go through the 3 books, volume 1, 2, 3. All these are available, downloadable. You can go through this, and if you go through these things in detail, then most of your query will be resolved. So if you have any questions in this regard, so we are ready to take the questions. So thank you very much for your patience listening in this code of ethics deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ranjitji, for your elaborate illustration and with an understanding of the code of ethics. I request all the participants, if you have any question, you can put the questions in your chat box, because we have another half an hour in our bag. So you can put your questions, then I'll see the question and forward it to Ranjitji. And if Ranjitji wants, I'll allow him to speak on one-to-one basis, because if you all speak at a time, it will become a chaos. And
there are some questions in the chat box. Should I take that first?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I have shared a summary of the questions raised, so
Okay.
you can just see the last chat.
Okay. Last chat. Where is the last chat?
That is given by me. The last one.
Last one or all? One by one.
No. There you see all are given.
Yes. Yes. So Prashant Banerjee talks about good morning this day, or this is the good morning. Good morning. Okay.
Sir, you just see the last chat.
Kalyan Saha. Should I take Kalyan, starting with Kalyan Saha?
Yes.
Can a concurrent auditor of a branch of a bank conduct a stock audit of the clients of the same branch? You want to say that you are a concurrent auditor of a branch, and your client has some loan in that branch, and you want to do the stock audit of that branch.
No. That branch has actually issued the stock audit appointment or doing the stock audit of the branch's client. Can the concurrent auditor do the stock audit also of the same branch?
Branch's client, I didn't get you. Which client?
The branch has many constituents. Many constituents. Now, one of the constituents stock audit has to be done. Is that stock audit can be done by the concurrent auditor of the same branch?
No, if you are a concurrent auditor of a particular bank branch, and that branch wants to get their client's stock audit or somebody else.
No, the bank's client's stock audit.
So what is the problem?
No, I don't know whether it is permissible. Under
why not? You are a concurrent auditor. You can do the stock audit. What is the problem? No problem.
That's good. And my second question was: is requesting a bank to issue the branch statutory audit or stock audit is against the code of conduct?
No, statutory auditor cannot do the stock audit, because stock audit is an internal audit function.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Say if I go to a bank for requesting them to please issue me a branch audit, is that a violation of code of conduct?
No, solicitation of work is not permissible, because you cannot say ki please allot me the audit, or you cannot complain that last 10 years I'm not getting the work, that. These kind of solicitation are not permissible in our code of ethics.
Okay, right. And my another question is that can ICAI set up a minimum fees?
We have a minimum, we have a recommendatory minimum fees prescribed by the ICAI. The list of this fees is on the institute website, but most of the members are not following, and these minimum fees cannot be made mandatory because we don't have the mandate to regulate the fees of the profession. We can give our guidance. So this fees has been made recommendatory, not the mandatory.
Okay. And my last question is that can a CA with certificate of practice do the day trading of shares for himself?
No, you have to see our 190A regulation of the CA Act says that a chartered accountant in practice cannot involve in any other activity except the profession of accountancy, except with the special permission of the council, where the extraordinary situations come, the council also permit. But in your case, suppose you are doing the day trading, and if the day trading, the income tax return says that these are the income from profession and not the capital gain, not the income from other sources. So on that basis, it will not be permitted, because how we will find out what other service you are doing? So that is the ITR is the evidence. So if the ITR, you have the business income from share trading, so in my opinion, that is not permissible.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Then we have Kalyan Saha. Can a CA with the
Sir,
COP?
this is done. This is done.
Oh, same.
Same.
Suman Saha, can CA logo be used in the same? No, Chartered Accountant Code of Ethics and Conduct prohibits. You can't have any kind of logo or any nomenclature or any kind of communication combination of your CA firm name. That is not permitted.
Sir, he actually wanted to the CA logo that we have, the CA logo.
CA logo, that tick mark logo is allowed.
Yes.
Emblem is not allowed.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Then can in social media? Yes, why not? Social media is also permitted now in advertisement guideline. You can have your firm name in the social media, Twitter account, Facebook account, the way you have the website guideline, same we have also covered in the social media. So now that part we have taken care. Social media, you can very well have your CA name, everything is there. Abhijit Pathak, what is this? Can a CA display other institute certification outside India like CISA, CIA? This year we have allowed our member who has done the other institute qualification, and the institute has MRA or MOU with those kind of institute, literally institute recognize those degree, then those kind of degree has been permitted to be used in your visiting card now. Earlier it was not there. From 1st July it is permitted.
Hello, is CISA allowed? CISA?
CISA, if you have done CISA, and I have to check whether institute has tie-up with the CISA authority. If we have recognized
CISA, CIA. CIA also, Institute of Internal Auditors. Institute of Internal Auditors, USA.
No, do we? I have to check whether we have MOU with that CIA or not. The regulation says that those degree has to be recognized by the ICAI. Only then.
But these are globally recognized degrees.
But sir, we have to be MRA or MOU with, because I'm giving you example. Suppose you have done CPA. CPA we have tie-up key by giving 4 instead of 4 paper. If you give 1 paper, being a CA, you will get the CPA. So that MOU we have, and if you are a CPA, you can write the CPA. So the institute has decided that those kind of institute where we have MOU or tie-up, these services will, these degree are permitted.
So how can one know? Can we find out from the website?
List is there, sir. You can write. We can give you the list of those MRA.
Okay. All right.
We have our MOU and MRA list that you can find out from the website.
All right.
Then what is the another questions?
The next one is from Mr. Partho Pratim Paul. Are the provisions of documentations applicable for tax auditors also?
Why not? Why not? Documentation is for everybody. It's not confined to one audit or another audit. Whatever attest function you are doing as a practicing CA, documentation is mandatory. And for your knowledge, I am the chairman of the Tax Quality Audit Review Board this year. We are very shortly coming out with a checklist of the tax audit, so that whenever this checklist you can give your article, they can fill it up. So 90% work will be done if they fill this checklist honestly. So that will help you to discharge your function more appropriately. So next 1 week, 1 month, by 31st August or first week of September, we will give you a complete checklist. And if you fill up that checklist, your audit will be done.
But sir, how can a chartered accountant be presumed to have have a knowledge of every other acts and rules, so that as far as the nuclear is applicable?
That is the sir global standard. I'm telling you, if suppose India has to be a developed country, if you want to be go in the $5 trillion, $3 trillion, and you want to compete with the global standards, then you have to follow this line. If you are the NOCLAR says you don't have to suo moto find out. In course of audit, they are one line they have written. In course of audit, if you come across, you cannot close your eyes. You cannot say, this is not my domain, I will not comment. The NOCLAR says कि आपको अगर पता चला तो आपको लिखना पड़ेगा. But if you come across and you can say, no, this is not my scope of work, environmental audit, not my domain, then why you are answering in Caro, all the dues has been paid of the various statute. These are also not our domain, but we have to comment. So if the whole point is the time is the globalization. If we have to compete with the world, then these global standards we have to follow. Of course, because of the pandemic, this NOCLAR is not applicable now. This has been deferred. But sooner or later, 1 year, 2 years down the line, it is bound to come.
So, but will it not create a room to make the CA soft target for that?
Sir, soft target, long target नहीं है. अगर आपको knowledge है, तभी आप audit कर पाएंगे. अभी government का आपने regulation देखा नहीं है. अभी NFRA is going to be so powerful in the time to come. Unfortunately, ICI has not been able to regulate the way we should regulate. Now the government has taken over. Now they want the KYC of the firm. They want the KYC of the auditor, which we ourselves, now in our case, we are not asking the member to give the ITR return. Only 10% in MEF we are asking. The government is preparing entire KYC of the firm is required. They are now also asking you will get the letter that what are your clients, what kind of fees you are charging. All this data the government is preparing to ask from every chartered accountant. So the regulatory part, if we will not regulate, the government will regulate. And in that point, you don't have any option. You have to provide if you want to do the audit.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
The next question is again related to visiting card only. I think probably the question that is coming in the mind is, suppose I am a chartered accountant and a cost accountant. Then what can I write in my visiting card apart from writing FCA?
If you have taken permission from the institute to do the additional course, like I am a company secretary, I am also a cost accountant, and if I have taken permission from the institute while doing this course as in form 112, then you are allowed to mention this degree. But if you have not taken permission, then even if you have done those courses, you are not permitted to mention.
So if he has done that during a period when his articleship was not there, that means maybe after articleship or before articleship, then that is also permitted.
Yes.
Okay, but for foreign degrees, the MRA and MOU has to be
has to be followed.
Okay.
But if anybody has not taken the permission priorly, but now he wants to take the permission by filing any fees penalty. Can he do it?
That has provision is there by rupees 10,000 condonation of delay provision is there that can be regularized.
Why such a harsh provision?
Sir, these are not our provision. These are the 1963 provision. These are not the new provision. When our forefathers started this code of ethics, that point of time since it is coming.
But for every code of ethics, there should be some logic behind.
Yes.
So why it is so that
harsh provision in the sense that the logic is that suppose you have doing an articleship from a 10 to 5 and you are not attending the office and you are doing involve other course also. So to restrict those conditions, this provision has come for articleship. But if you have done the other course after articleship or before articleship, that is not an issue. But suppose an article is doing an articleship and he is involved 4 or 5 courses simultaneously. So that to restrict those students, this provision has come.
Understood.
The next question is from CA Ankit Garg. So he's asking that whether a CA in practice can be appointed as nominated person on behalf of company in a LLP where that company is designated partner in that LLP.
No, what appointment he's asking? He want to be a this partner simpliciter or as a chartered accountant in what
Sir,
capacity?
Sir, in LLP, sir, LLP, in LLP, company is a designated partner.
Yes.
And company, on the behalf of that company, one person has to be appointed as a nominated person, individual person.
No, you cannot be. You cannot be. Because you as a chartered accountant in practice cannot be a partner, simpliciter or any nominated person in that LLP where your company is a partner. So that provision has been there in our code of ethics.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
The next question is from Vasant Lal sir. He's asking whether a CA in practice can do shared transaction for his HUF.
This same analogy applicable to you is also applicable to HUF. In HUF, we have a provision that says ki if you are a karta or a member of a HUF, then you being a practicing CA cannot be involved in the day-to-day affairs of the HUF. Because if that HUF is working on your involvement, that is not permissible in our, because you, as I told you, 190A regular, you cannot be involved in other business activity. But there are some exceptions are there where some business has come from the heredity and that business cannot be run because of your involvement, because you are the only person who can continue that business. So in those kind of situation, case to case basis, institute has permitted, but that is also with the permission of the council. But here HUF transaction business in share, you as a karta, if you are involved in day-to-day affair, then that is not permitted. If somebody else is doing signing of checkbook, contract, letter, communication, email, that has to be established that you are not involved in day-to-day, that only it is allowed, otherwise not allowed.
The next question is from CA Dibyendu Banerjee. He's asking that if a CA has been introduced to a client by another CA. So if I am conducting a statutory audit of a client and I introduce a chartered accountant to that client, and later on that chartered accountant takes my assignment, the statutory audit. So whether that is allowed or not.
No, that is here. Here our code of ethics says you can share your fees with your only member. Now our clause 2 also says when your chartered accountant introduce you a client, now any work of that client you cannot take directly, you have to route through the person who has introduced you to that client. This is very clear in our code of ethics. So this is the fundamental practice of ethics. If somebody introduce you, You just come through that. You directly cannot deal with that person of that particular client. You have to come through that person who has introduced you to that client. This is the number one. But now if that person article have been appointed as a CA and he has taken that work, so this is there is no provision in our conduct, but this is the violation of the fundamental principle of code of ethics.
Okay, now the next question is related to this is a known fact. This is everyone. This is being discussed now. So whether PSU bank can conduct, whether concurrent auditor of a PSU bank can also conduct its quarterly review or limited review. That is the question. Which is,
as per our guidance note of the AASB says ki quarterly review is the statutory function. Concurrent auditor cannot do. But what is this case? Those branches where statutory auditor is not there, they are insisting the concurrent auditor to sign the quarterly review report, and that report has to be submitted to the management and not to the central auditor. So these are the plea they are taking, but this complaint has come to the ICAI. In my opinion, statutory concurrent auditor cannot do the quarterly review because these are both are the different function. But non-auditable branches, if you are responding to the management, then they are taking this plea. But PDC is representing to the RBI in this regard, so we should wait for that.
Now the next question is whether any CA can participate in tender below the minimum fees mentioned.
No. If what is the logic of minimum fees? Tell me. If you have been allowed to mention below the minimum tender fees, then what is the logic of bringing this minimum fees criteria? You tell me.
Right.
Is there any logic of bringing the minimum fees then? It's a common sense. If the institute says कि आप minimum fees नहीं है तो नहीं करेंगे, लेकिन आप बोलते हैं minimum fees से नीचे ही करेंगे, तो minimum fees हम लाए क्यों हैं?
So the next question would be, how do we regulate this then?
Actually, as I told you, ethics is a personal judgment. Everything cannot be codified. Now we have to search our heart and conscience whenever we are confronted these kind of situation. Still you want to go ahead. Nobody, everything cannot be in black and white. It is your judgment, your mental ability to analyze what you want to do. We have ethics, we have regulation, we have laws. Now, if you want to supersede or violate the laws, and somebody can say ki how to catch hold of them, then this is not the case. If somebody complains, institute come into the picture and take the proceeding. But every professional institute cannot regulate personally. There are so many things are happening. So we can just give you the platform and the facilitation. It is up to the personal judgment of the member concerned.
The next question is, can a CA in service mention degrees from other institutes like Insurance Institute of India in visiting card? I think the answer will be same that you have given earlier. Is there any restriction or any penal provision as per new code of ethics of ICAI?
Restriction and penal provision, as I told you, the penal provision is as per our schedule 1 and schedule 2. These are the same. But problem is now we are living in a situation where in addition to ICAI, there are so many regulators has come, whether it's a SEBI, RBI, NFRA, CBI or MCA. So many regulators has come. Now, suppose one of the firm has been banned for 5 years by SEBI in one of the case recently. Now, there are many cases we have seen RBI has blacklisted some of the firm. So, NFRA now banning the auditor. Institute is now taking action against the member. So now this code of ethics is not confined to one regulator. We are in a position where multiple regulator has come. So as far as new provision or new penalty, it's a manifold. Now you are exposed to so many regulators. So now you cannot afford to take these risks. And if you are doing your duty diligently, then the only remedy we have to document our acts properly. If we can show that these are the documentation on the basis of which I have justified, that's fine. But whatever this no-clar or resignation of the auditor or this documentation 15% fees, whatever you are seeing today, sooner or later these are going to be reality. And if we have to be relevant in this practice field, because new members are not coming to the, I am telling to various platforms these facts. And now we have 3 lakh, 1,40,000 in practice, 1,60,000 in job. 1,40,000 number is not increasing because new members are not coming to the profession. 99% are going for job because better opportunities are available in job. Now these 1,40,000 member, if you see my UDIN data, 1,12,000 are only generating the UDIN. Now if the 1,12,000 member are generating UDIN, then they are the active chartered accountant who are doing attest function. Rest are in consultancy and other things. So if these 1,12,000 members who are actively doing attest function and new members are not coming, so where is the number? So number is very low, but if we don't value ourselves and we cannot say no, if we say yes to each and every kind of work which are coming, then the purpose will be defeated. The way we say no, then the client, like you said, extension of the date. Why we should tell the government to extend the date? Is it not our job? Whom accounts we are supposed to audit? The client. If the client's accounts are not ready on time, what is our fault? We are ready to do the audit. If we are ready to do the audit and his accounts are not ready, why we should go to the government ki aap date badha do? It is their job. Whether FICCI, CIA or Chamber of Commerce anytime has gone to the government to change the date of the filing of the return? No. We have taken all the pains of the client on ourselves. And whenever we go to the government says, why you have come? You are the auditor. If the client accounts are not ready, let them suffer. Why you are bothered? So somehow, somewhere we have to decide how we want to be regulated. Whether we want to remain SMP, small and medium practitioner, this should not be applicable. That should not. If we want to remain like that, we don't want to grow, then that is one aspect. If we want to grow, we want to follow the standard, we have to update ourselves, then we have to change our yardstick and the thought process. Otherwise, it's a very difficult now to be relevant in this fast changing environment.
We have discussion on share trading earlier also. Now the question that has come, basically the member wants to understand what would be not allowed. So share trading intraday. So if I am investing on say 3 months.
All these questions are depend on what you are displaying in your ITR.
So capital gains is allowed.
Capital gain, income from other sources are allowed. Business income is not allowed. This is the very simple analogy.
The next question is, presently many foreign universities are conducting online certification courses like Harvard, Virginia University. So whether again this will be considered by ICAI?
Yes, because of this pandemic also now institute is in the very advanced stage of discussion that all these examinations should become online. Because this November examination also will be able to conduct or not, we have a doubt. So if this situation continue, then somehow we have to also change our process, and online examination will be the need of the hour. So hopefully we are also in the same line we are thinking.
The next question is, what happens when a government client does not mention minimum fees in tender document? What if the government who is bringing out the tender does not mention the minimum fees?
If the government does not mention in that tender document minimum fees, and that is the statutory audit tender, then please bring these facts to our knowledge. We will represent to that government organization, because in the past many organizations we have represented and they were not aware of this guideline and they have changed their tender after our representation. So please bring to our notice. We will represent and get it changed.
Now the next one is not a question as such. So Partho sir is saying that whether ICAI should not control all these assignments. So why should there be reliance on clients? Why will they appoint us? There should be a central system from where all allotments will be done.
This discussion is already going on in NFRA. NFRA has come out with a consulting paper. Sorry, MCA. MCA has come out with a consulting paper which says the impanelment of the auditor and the appointment of the auditor through that panel, number one. They are also in the process to talk about the joint audit, whether one auditor or two auditor can be a joint auditor in every audit assignment. So how to check the various audit file of the CA firm. All these parameters are already in the discussion of the MCA paper. We have also given our view. They are also collecting the views from the other stakeholder, and hopefully this will be a reality in 1 or 2 years, because the way government is so active that they want every professional, every company to be regulated in letter and spirit. And that's why we are also, Institute has recently also become so proactive in the sense that peer review process, we have completely revised the statement of peer review. UDIN is one of the example why we have brought UDIN, because in our name the others should not sign and represent to the government that this is done by CA, but we can say this is not done by CA. This backdating was also one of the reason for UDIN, so that if the client is not ready, we should say because of UDIN I am helpless, I cannot sign. So these were as a tool given to the auditor to say to the client that we have some limitation, we cannot sign in this situation. So in my opinion, if the institute will not proactively do these steps, the government will step in and they will start doing. So it is the high time we are doing, we should come forward, and the member has to be followed. As I told you, we have not much number. The kind of economy is there, the kind of new works are coming, insolvency works, valuation work, forensic audit is coming. We have not enough number. 1,14,000 is not a big number for a economy like $3 trillion. And at the same time, new members are not coming. So when new members are not coming, who will cater this entire economy? If we are not reskilled or upskilled, who will do that? So the situation may come, the profession, some of the work can be shifted to the other professional. If we say we are not able to do it, somebody else will do. So the right time is to skill ourselves, reskilled, and then discharge our duty. We have to say no. Small work, all these things. And this UDIN also, I'm giving you hundreds of examples. So many wrongdoings are happening in the name of the CA. They are changing the balance sheet figure, putting the same UDIN number. There is one contract of the ADB, Asian Development Bank in the Rajasthan. I am giving an example. 2,50,000 crore tender was there, and one CA firm was appointed as a checking the documents of that tender by the ADB. And one client has participated in the tender where the figure was not, his requirement was not matching with the ratio as required by the tender. And after next tender, he had just changed the figure, and the same balance sheet, same UDIN number, something, everything remains same. So either CA has changed the figure or the client has changed the figure, but that balance sheet is different. And when it was brought to the notice of the ADB, they have cancelled the contract. So because of the UDIN, so many things we are able to detect. Already more than 700 crore, I'm telling you, 700 and more this fraud we have already unearthed by UDN, because many non-CA banker clients are misusing our signature and putting this figure. So somehow we have come out with some checks and balances, but it is our duty also how to behave in the professional way and not to involve in this small issue, because work is bound to come. Who will do the work? Somebody here and there will do. Who will do the work? And digitalization and this economy, the data, what is the raw material of our profession? That is the data, and the data is increasing every year. When the data is increasing, some person is required to watch the data. And who is the person? Only chartered accountant. Right now in India, only CA can watch the data. No other professional has been given that mandate. So when every year the data are increasing, so your work is bound to increase. There is no option. So we have to think how we can take forward this profession to the satisfaction of the various stakeholders.
I think the next question is again related to an old question. So whether any certification online course from foreign university has acceptance of ICAI. That means I think he again wants to know the same thing, whether he can write that on his visiting card, because I think he is allowed to do the course, but he cannot write it on the visiting card until and unless there is a MRA or MOU.
He can do the course, he can pass the he can do the course, he can pass the exam, and if MRA or MOU is there, he can also mention the degree in his visiting card.
So I think, hello. So Devan, is there any more questions?
Yes. One question is, the government fees of CAG empaneled works are not satisfactory. While we try for increasing the fees in such cases with management, we see many fellow members not coming forward for sale. Can something be done in this regard? So this is not a question.
These are the fallouts of our profession, where unfortunately one or other member are ready to do at any fees. So that regulatory aspect, institute cannot regulate these kind of issues. The member has to think themselves. In my opinion, they should not do these kind of work. If we start saying no, the government will be bound to revise their guideline and revise their change. But the kind of fees they are offering, in my opinion, these are not justified as a professional to do those kind of work.
So there has again been a request to convince the government authorities from behalf of ICAI to mention minimum fees in the tenders that they come out with. And this is an interesting question. Can a CA be an agent for issue of digital signature and receive service charges for issue of digital signature certificate?
Deepak Rath, just want to tell you, sir, digital signature agent for issue of DSC, you are not permitted to do the mutual fund work. On the same line, DSC work is also not allowed, and just like a teen facilitator center, all these things has been allowed, but the issuance of DSC has not been permitted to CA, because this proposal has also come to the ICAI by the Ministry of Information Technology, Ravi Shankar Prasad Ministry. They wanted the chartered accountant to be the person who can attest the Xerox paper with the original, certify the document. The bank manager, the postman are now permitted to do that. CA, where they want to include in the CA, and we have deliberated this aspect in the council, and it was decided that what is the role of the CA. The role of the value of the CA says that we are here to make an opinion on the facts and figure provided to us. Now, if we are confined ourselves to certify the Xerox copy with the original, then we are demeaning our signature. because we are not a gazetted officer just to certify the Xerox paper with the original. We are here to make an opinion. And once your role is to make an opinion, we cannot take this kind of work where certified to be true copy of Xerox with the original. And the council decided that this will be a demeaning of the signature of CA, and we have rejected the request of the ministry that our CA cannot do this kind of work. This was the decision taken in 2018 when I was the PDC chairman, and we have deliberated this issue in the council. So the point here is that we should know what is the worth of our signature. When you are putting a signature in a piece of paper, that paper becomes authentic for the rest of the people. So when that paper becomes so authentic, then something is there in our signature, and we cannot just certify Xerox paper with the original. So on that basis, this DSC and all these things are not permitted to chartered accountant.
I think there is no more question in
Yes.
the chat box. We have taken all the questions.
So it's 1 o'clock, time is also over. So
Yes.
Yes.
thank you very much for very.
I have a question, Devan.
Yes, yes.
Can I?
Yeah.
Yes.
See, sir, in case of need, can a CA firm hire article clerk from some other firm and compensate the other firm?
No. There is a provision in our CA Act called secondment of article. Secondment of article provision are already there, wherein one CA firm can register an article, but he can depute that article to another firm. The stipend will be paid by the firm who has registered, but for the training of that article, he can depute that article to another firm. That provision is there, which is called secondment of article. You can use that services.
Okay.
Then sir, that will involve some documentation with ICAI also.
That is already there. The provision and the form, everything is there.
So that cannot be suo moto. Okay.
No, it has to be registered with the institute.
Yes. Sumanda.
Thank you. So I think we are at the end of this program. Thank you, Devan, for conducting the program so nicely. And thank you, Ranjit ji, for taking up your time and giving us your time. And also, I will also try to thank the participant who has taken the pain to acquaint themselves in this system. Because though we have registered 100, many of calls are coming that they could not attend or they could not log in. There are some system error. So I think this type of problem will pop up in the coming future, and it will be rectified by using more and more of this platform. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Ranjit sir. Thank you, Ranjit sir. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Abhijit sir. Sumanda, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for attending this program.
Thank
We'll
you.
be taking the recording uploading the recording.